So if you can kind of lead us up into what is your background, what got you to where you are now, and then we can discuss like, what are the leadership lessons that you teach, that type of thing.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. To everybody that's tuning in, thanks for doing so. You're looking at a guy who divorced himself from his first name a number of years ago, and that might be kind of interesting in the fighter pilot community that I come from. Call signs are awarded. The tribe, they give you the way that you're going to be known for the rest of your life, and I really enjoyed that. And so that kind of answers the first part of the question there. What's your background? I was an Air Force fighter pilot. I flew F-15C models and F-22A models, and what that basically means is I loved going fast. I liked being out there on the front lines of our nation's defense. What you see behind me is a gun barrel from an F-22 Raptor,
Wow,
my
that's
going
good.
away gift as I gave up command of a fighter squadron. And I got a chance, one of the few people that for sure got a chance to live my childhood dream. I saw Star Wars in 1977 and wanted to be like Luke Skywalker. Got a chance to do that here on planet
But
Earth.
wait, Luke Skywalker, the Jedi or the pilot? Because he was a hell of an X-wing fighter pilot.
Yeah, it was the pilot. It was the
I
pilot.
knew it.
I've never figured out how to like move things with the force, so but
No, no.
and so that was I used to think that I existed to be a fighter pilot, and I for sure got a chance to be a fighter pilot. And I love that world, and I love the community that I was in, love the leadership that I learned through that, love the experience of it all. And when that was taken away from me, I still found tremendous value in thinking along those lines and teaching what I lived, which also then ties to your question. I can talk about some of the roadblocks to my continued progress as a fighter pilot if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely. It's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so career was going brilliantly. Everything was exactly the way that I would have wanted it to be. And then I got a little bout with colorectal cancer, which changed everything. And as a consequence of a couple of pretty horrific GI surgeries, I ended up having to change my vector. So for a guy that existed to be a fighter pilot to no longer be able to do so was a pretty rough phase there, and ended up retiring early from the Air Force and falling back to St. Louis, Missouri, with family in town, kind of thinking that if I peace out due to a recurrence of cancer, wife and children will still have some mutual support, which was very important. And then
Wow.
to the question of what do you do when you can't do the thing that you love?
Right. Wow. I would imagine the CEOs and Vistage are kind of blown away by that background. So I'm like, there's a few things that are going around in my mind right now. I would imagine fighter pilot is a young man's sport.
It
So
is.
is everyone get retired from it at certain points? Like I just had open heart surgery and I got high blood pressure and all that good stuff. I would imagine that's a no go for me.
Yeah, it probably would be a no go for you. Heart surgery, just like colorectal cancer, was a no go for me.
Yeah.
But if you can stay healthy and if you are in a position that warrants it, I have a former boss who was a three-star general still flying F-22s in combat. So
Wow.
there are a limited number of positions for even the more seasoned members of the team to continue to fly, fight, and win. So yeah, I mean, key there is to stay healthy enough to do so.
Well, so I've got a soft spot in my heart for anyone that serves in the military, and I was delayed at BWI on one of the many times I've been delayed there for flights not going perfect, and there were two airmen. Now these were not fighter pilots. These guys, I think one guy was a truck driver, the other guy was in logistics, that kind of a thing. Very like let's say humble backgrounds, and they were drinking at the bar because they were delayed too, and they were on their way to Yemen. So I picked up their bill without them knowing it. And I didn't want the bartender to tell them, but the bartender did. And these two guys, they kind of walked over to me like, "You didn't have to do that." I'm like, "Dude, I might be delayed, but I get to sleep in my own bed tonight. You're going to Yemen, which, I know enough about geography to know that's not a fun place to go to.
That's
And
right.
you're going there so I can go home and sleep in my own bed. So the least I could do is pick up a tab. But I
Yeah,
got to
that's
tell you,
awesome.
Cujo, I've never told this story on air, but I got to tell you this story and get your impression of it. So I got a buddy of mine that not only flew fighters, he also flew helicopters. So they tried to make him the mission commander or the commander of Gabrisky Airport here on Long Island.
Ah,
And so he flew the gunships to rescue downed pilots behind enemy lines. So picture as he described it to me, two Black Hawk helicopters would come in, one loaded with ordnance, the other one's the rescue mission itself. So he would fly and then suppress all the enemy in the area so that the rescue helicopter could come in, pick up the down pilot and take off. In fact, his partner, his co-pilot, was the co-pilot from the Mission of the Perfect Storm that the movie's based on.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that guy's stories alone, you could have made a movie about. So,
Sure.
but he was describing it to us right when the movie came out, that when they missed the midair refueling in the movie, he knew that they had to ditch the aircraft. And I'm like, oh, how'd you know that? He said it's something to do with the prop wash on the tanker plane, that you can get the port side, but you can't get the starboard side because it moves around too much, even in the best of weather conditions, let alone the perfect storm. He said it's so dangerous, it's the equivalent to being shot at in combat. And if I'm remembering all the details right, because this was a while ago, but the story really stuck with me. He said what they would do is they would train for it in typical military fashion, where they'd have to midair refuel multiple times in a single night with talent that they didn't know each other. So it's kind of like a pressure cooker environment. So, and because if the blade hits the line, both vehicles can explode. It's done for in military training, so they have to do it multiple times. So after the first time they do it, they're ordered to they're ordered to midair refuel, go from like 10 minutes they could die any second to 2 hours of bored out of their minds while they waste the fuel. So that this way they're under the pressure cooker having to go through this thing again. By the third time, they've caught up on all the stories, the jokes, the families, rotations, all that type of stuff. And then they would find pickup trucks on lonely stretches of highway. They'd shadow them, get them into a safe place, pull a trigger on the yoke. A light from the helicopter would light up the pickup truck, and then they'd disappear into the night sky and monitor the police frequency for UFO reports. Now tell me you wouldn't join the Air Force just to get to do that. I'm thinking it's the second thing Sikorsky did after he invented the freaking thing.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Right? So I told that to a cab driver in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the dude literally pulled the cab to the side of the road, stopped the cab, and then sighed. And he went, that explains so much. That's where they actually do the training at Scottsdale, Arizona. And you know the guys who've been doing that since the thing was invented can't tell anybody. So when people come in going, yeah, UFO aliens, UFO aliens, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna investigate that. So, well, I told that to the two airmen that I bought the round for, or their bar tab, and one of them goes, that happened to me. I go, well, what happened? He goes, well, he's taken he was a 18-wheel truck driver, right? So I don't know what you call it, CDL or something. He had to take a load of something around the airbase. And you know, like when you get to like a tiny forest and like they'll cut the road in half of the forest. So there's like this little, I don't even know what you call that, but the deal is like, so you got a couple of trees on one side, a couple of trees on the other side. And as he's turning to make the left in between these trees, he sees like an Apache attack helicopter take off, right, out of his periphery. And then as he gets between the pair of trees, there it is. And it's about 4 feet off the ground. And he's staring face to face while he's locking up the brakes is the pilot. And the pilot just goes like this and then takes off. He said he almost jackknifed the truck, but it was like I guess the warrant officers can get away with certain things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's hilarious. It's equal parts frightening and back to hilarious.
Yeah. All right, so tell me what do you teach the CEOs in your presentation? Yeah. What do you call it, and what's the takeaway?
Yeah, the session's called Debrief to Win. I name everything at VMAX Group something tied to Debrief to Win. The first book was called Debrief to Win, and it goes back to when I was teaching at our weapons school. Same thing that the Navy runs with Top Gun, the Air Force has had for 2 decades prior. It occurred to me that like the leadership that we were teaching at our fighter weapons school, the team dynamics that we were teaching, how it is that a team is going to survive and thrive in disruption, are all great things that apply everywhere. It ought not just be something that's taught in the military. And so way back in 2004, when I was an instructor there, I said, all right, someday I'm going to find a way to distribute this knowledge specifically to the business world, because close friends of mine had lamented the absence of leadership development in the business world. And the tipping point into this was colorectal cancer. So when the world said you can't fly airplanes any longer, I decided to take action on the theory that I had back in 2004, and I took it to market and tested it with a company in St. Louis. And the principal from that company said, "Oh my gosh, this has been a game changer for us, and I need you to come speak to my Vistage group." And I remember thinking to myself, like, if this Vistage thing is legal, moral, and ethical, sure. I had no, I had no idea what Vistage. I'd never heard of anything called Vistage before. So I did it as a favor to him because he had done a huge favor to me of cutting me a big check. And I took my little, early version workshop of translating the principles that we were teaching at the Fighter Weapons School to Business to 2 free Vistage presentations in St. Louis, and that led to a bunch of requests at a time when my body was very broken. When hopping into an airplane was a very dicey proposition because of how undependable my system was, and tied to that, how nervous I was to go out there and test it. So those 2 early Vistage talks led to 82 requests in my first year, 2019, as a speaker. I said yes to all of those, and part of it was trying to figure out how to be able to meet those requests with a broken body. And ultimately, and to this crowd, I can share, I thank Vistage for helping me in part to sort of not necessarily fully heal myself, but get myself to a much better state of functionality by figuring out how to work with a broken colon. So I met all those requests, went out there and started speaking, and in the process learned how to teach those principles better. And really what we're teaching is, how do you ramp up the leadership game to meet the demands of situational leadership in today's world? And many folks don't recognize that leadership is situational, it's not static. And so we do the same thing year after year after year, and it doesn't quite work that way. And so our ambition in our little Debrief to Win workshops is exposing CEOs to what it takes to lead situationally and how to ramp up the leadership game. And a huge piece of that is learning how to learn better as a team. The whole idea behind Debrief to Win.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah, it's been a pretty popular deal.
My day-to-day, well, it isn't every single day, but very often, is working with, whether it's companies or sometimes even governments, nonprofits, with crisis communication work. And oftentimes I'm brought in to assist legal teams who obviously understand there's a public element to what's happening. It's it's not usually, in my world, it's not usually a product that isn't selling or something of that. A crisis being something that should not have happened. It could be a very public tragedy. It could be a regulatory investigation conducted by either the House or the Senate in Washington, or even in your state capital, and how that's going to impact you. It could be other issues within a company, a nonprofit, or a government. And I have to agree 1,000% that leadership isn't static, because there are folks that may think, well, you're a leader and you face every situation the same, but that's not necessarily true, because in a crisis, first of all, there are different kinds of crises, and how are you going to react in that scenario? So would you say, and this is, I'm trying to word it a certain way, but would you say that it is important that a leader be prepared to react to the unimaginable, and if they are going to have to react to something that they, like they said after the 9/11 Commission report said, the biggest failure of the United States government leading up to the September 11, 2001 attacks was a failure of imagination, a failure that it was possible to hijack these airliners, fly them into the Twin Towers, fly them into the Pentagon, and Lord knows if it was going to the Capitol, the fourth one. But do you think that leaders today that you train, not all of them, but that you may be in front of, do you think some of them have a lack of imagination of what could happen, or do you think that what you most likely will encounter is they can imagine what would be a crisis that's on the horizon. It's just they come to folks like you to learn how to better prepare for those scenarios.
Yeah, I think. Oh man, what a great line of questioning here. I think the capacity is there for sure. We just get so overwhelmed with the day to day, and I mean, it's just a nonstop tsunami of task work that prevents us from ever getting to the point of being able to imagine. And what we're really trying to do is find the capacity to reduce stress so that we can breathe and think a little bit and to be able to lead more clearly. And for sure, learning how to plan with an eye towards accounting for the unaccountable is mission critical to this. You know, you think back to one of the best things that happened in the pandemic. You know, you go from a happy little orientation towards, oh my gosh, the world's turned upside down. Effectively, for us here in business, overnight, it caused most organizations to get into a learning phase. Like we had to rapidly learn our way through this challenge. We hadn't thought about it before. We weren't expecting it. We were caught with our pants down. Went into a phase of learning, which was actually really healthy for us. The question is, are we still in that learning our way to and being prepared to learn through disruption, or have we fallen back to old habits and allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by the day to day? And if it's the allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed phase, then we're not leading as effectively as we need to. And by the way, what you're talking about, you know, that lack of imagination right now, if we're caught unawares by the next black swan event, that's on us.
Yeah.
Right? Like the last time, I can accept the fact that I was also caught unawares, but right now I need to be, especially with a, and I'll timestamp this discussion for just a moment. I mean, we're in the midst of a U.S. presidential election year. Anybody that's anticipating smooth sailing through the latter part of this year, you know, slightly delusional, right? So we have to anticipate the next black swan event and give ourselves the ability to confidently lead through it. And part of our ambition as leaders is to project hope and optimism and a better tomorrow to our teammates, regardless of how bad things get. And we're not going to get there if we're just always playing catch up.
I call that in my presentations, I call that canner, constant and never ending reassurance. So, but it's not like, you don't want to lie to them. You want to acknowledge what we're up against. Oh, and I don't know if you've ever spoken for Bob Davick's groups in California yet. He was my
Oh,
trainer when I was going through chair training 16 years ago. And he said a line that I don't know where you could put this plaque, but it should be on a plaque. And the line was, if you have to eat a turd, don't nibble at it. I was like, damn, I think I might make a shirt of that one too.
that's a good shirt. Yeah. You could make a killing off of marketing that thing.
Yeah. So like to me, I'm not a huge fan. Well, a couple of things I'm going to add, lend some credence to what you just said, although you say it in a very credible way. It's been my experience. I've participated in somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 Vistage meetings, all in, right? So between being a chair, a member, a speaker, I think you'd have to be like a chair for like 40 years to catch me. So there's a thing I focus, I sense where it's a high function group, low function group. But when I get the chair in quiet moments of confidence, because I have all three of those vantage points, they kind of treat me like family. So
Mm-hmm.
so what I did was I would ask them about their group, and invariably the word solid tactician comes up too often. And I would argue is, human nature being what it is, what is our strength can become our weakness. So is your nose too close to the grindstone in order to see over the horizon or around the corner? And
Mm-hmm.
then what happens is they've started to ask me, like, I've gotten much more confident in my presentations now. I used to just kind of lecture. Now it becomes more conversational. And they ask me all these questions about coming depressions and world population collapse, because I teach statistical literacy and how to predict the future more accurately utilizing human nature and the science of. So the argument is that the majority of people, they don't recognize how boring and predictable human beings are,
Mm-hmm.
and just how unpredictable black swan events are. So it's like, okay, well, how do we break those down? And now what's been going on lately is they keep asking me about population collapse and coming depressions and things like that. And what's the scenario? So I think out loud in front of them, and I'm not afraid to do that anymore because of the exact thing that you're bringing up. Because I don't have to be perfect. And frankly, a lot of the things they ask me, they could just Google. But the stuff that they can't Google is what you're referring to right now, because it can only tell you what's happened. It's the sum total of human
That's
knowledge.
right.
It's not the sum total of future human knowledge. So how do we stay prepared, and like kind of maybe nimble on our feet, that we can handle things? How do we increase our confidence that way? I think what that comes back to, Cujo, is our context. So it's like, what am I doing everything I can do for the betterment of everyone? Like when I go from me to we, it's inspirational for me. I sit back and look at it and say, let's operate in the best interest of everyone. And then what ends up happening is, I know I'm pointing the energies of the organization correctly. Then when you get that shock to the system, you can handle it a little bit better, with more confidence, and then react faster, and kind of not take it personal, not shut down. Because I think it's really what it comes down to is, whoever has the steadiest hand at the wheel is the de
Oh yeah,
facto leader.
that's right.
Whoever has the right attitude is the leader, regardless of rank, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
title. Whoever
Mm-hmm.
has the highest context is the leader in the room, or the de facto leader. So how can we concentrate on that? Know why we're doing whatever it is that we're attempting to do, and know it really well. Because I had a client who designed a lunar module, and when I asked people, why did we go to the moon, the um, the answers are scattered. Only a few people know it. I think the military people would know it better, but it's essentially because the Russians could rain down missiles on us from space and ruin our way of life, right? Eliminate us. Like in World War One, if you ruled the sea, you ruled the world. World War Two, you ruled the sky, you ruled the world. Sputnik goes up in '57. What do you think Eisenhower's thinking? So the moon was just a finish line. I know that because one of my clients designed a lunar module, and what it was is, it's like, if you give a strong enough body of intelligent people, like engineers and scientists, a strong enough why, they'll figure out the how.
Absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There seems to be like a common thread throughout all the better speakers in the system. I think one is, they're doing it for impact. Like they want to leave the world a better place. And to me, through commerce, we're capable of what religion hopes to accomplish and what politicians fail at, which is taking care of large scale communities. Like you and I, before Mike jumped on, you and I were talking about, Mike, there's this company in St. Louis. Cujo, you remember the name? I couldn't remember the name, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to tell them the story?
Cambridge Engineering, yeah,
Yeah.
and you impressed me because you're not from here, but you went into their place, and as you walked in through the front door, what did you see?
Actually, I wasn't at their place. I presented it to them in St. Louis when I presented in St. Louis, so I didn't get to see what you were talking about.
Okay, what was the message you came away with from Cambridge Engineering, a producer of HVAC materials?
They said that the mission of the company was to glorify God.
And they've been around for like, I don't know, maybe 120 years, something like that, if memory serves.
Dude, it's even better than that. They have a 300-person waiting list to have their resumes evaluated for a company that has 100 employees. That's the only time I've ever heard of that. They got the human side of all of this cold. Now, it sounds like, to a native New Yorker, glorify God, it sounds corny as all get out, right? But they got the human side nailed.
They
Now,
do.
when I did talk to them, they were a little naive on like the sophistication of selling companies and buying companies and all that type of stuff. So they were a little naive on that side. But the deal is that they got the human side cold. And that's something that's capable of happening. It's almost like, like you're only going to ever be as intelligent as you're going to be. That's genetic sets that tone. But knowledge is accumulatable. Getting the human aspect to a company is accumulatable. So it's, are you doing it for the right reasons? That sort of thing.
And by the way, multiple members of their company in Vistage. In fact, I want to say that it was a couple of members of that. I may have even actually been there for one of my free Vistage sessions back in 2018. That's how I came across them.
That's
I'm
cool.
blown away. I mean, they had at that time a waiting list. Every month they would allow 40 people from around the area to sign up to come watch one of their morning, call them huddles, and just to observe how the company goes about the business of getting ready for the day.
Wow.
And that in and of itself was inspirational.
Very
So,
cool
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, those are the
So,
kinds of things we want to get to.
yeah, totally. I think what it is, there's even a thing about how, I think men in general are naturally competitive. But there's a way about being competitive where it's not that I want to beat you, I want you to win, so that this way I can learn how you won, and that we can be better kind of together for society at the same time. You know what I mean? I don't know what you call
Well,
that.
that's the theory that underpins this debrief to win philosophy, which is all about learning constantly as a team, not in a with an eye towards punishment or blame, but rather with an eye towards helping teammates to meet or exceed expectations and to constantly raise the bar of our performance,
Yeah.
which is effectively the way that a high performance team, like a fighter squadron, analyzes how it is that they did the work that they did and how it is that they come through that analysis into having hope and optimism in a better tomorrow, and how it is that a fighter squadron is perpetually optimistic about the ability to win no matter what the odds are, and how it is that we actually embrace disruption and say, all right, we know that things aren't going to go according to plan. We can the only thing we can guarantee is that nothing's going to go the way that we had envisioned it, but we've also guaranteed that we've given ourselves the best ability to adapt real time, and we do not tolerate anybody here using the hey, well, it got hard today as a defense for why things did not still end up as a success. And so we've learned to eradicate defensiveness while also being eternally optimistic and position ourselves to learn constantly. And what a great attitude, mindset, set of processes to rely on as a team to navigate all the disruptions, Mike, that you're dealing with your clients, and that you're speaking to, Mark, in the sessions that you go and do, and all the business leaders that we come across in this enterprise called Vistage. And that was really the core of what it was we were trying to do when cancer, pivoted me and my family team out of the world and domain that I absolutely loved being in. I miss tremendously the feeling, the sensation, the experience of being out there, zipping across the skies at Mach 1.7 or whatever, and pulling 9 plus times the force of gravity. I mean, that's a pretty exciting place to be.
All right, so let me tell you a little quick story about my dad. So my dad was he just recently passed away. He was 96 when he did, though. So but the idea is he was in World War II, kinda. So he signed up for 8 years. I think he signed up in 42. So he was born in 27. Signs up, and he wanted to be a Navy aviator. Like his dream was to fly one of those trainer ones that actually had the earliest version of retractable landing gear. It was a biplane, and he said they said to him, you can either go to deck school and be like one of the guys with the orange cones doing like Warrior One pose on the what do you call them, carriers, or you go to college. So he goes, okay, I'll go to college. So he went to college for 2 years. He graduates. It's VJ day, and they go, anybody want out? He's like, okay. So he basically went to college for 2 years and got a uniform, but actually has, got benefits from being a veteran and all that stuff. Although I said, well, did you ever go on a plane? He said, twice. He said the first time his friends felt sorry for him, so they bought him a flight lesson in a farmer's field, like outside Massachusetts, where he was going to college. The second time was with a Marine pilot in a dive bomber. Like I think like a Douglas Dauntless, if I remember correctly.
Very cool.
So he took him on 3 dive bombing runs, not knowing he had already thrown up in his helmet in the first dive bombing. So that was his vast experience in a fighter.
Hey, listen, tied to that, and I'm so sorry for the loss of your father, but what a fantastic run, 96 years on this earth.
Totally. And along those lines, how are you doing health-wise?
Good enough for government work.
I'm stealing that line.
Mike, you can decide how high of a bar that is. But anyway, good enough to be able to go out there on the road as soon as we finish today's recording. But I remember at the beginning of March, kind of dreading. There was a week, March 2020, when I was going to be in 5 cities in 4 days, or maybe it was going to be like just horrible. And everything was a 2-hop, so I was going to get to the hotel around 1 to 2 a.m. for the Vistage. It was all Vistage that week, and I just remember not looking forward to it at all. And then got a notification probably like the Saturday before the Monday of hitting the road that all Vistage sessions had been shut down because of this pandemic. Okay. And so there's a couple of moments of like differing emotions, one of which was extreme joy of not having to be in all 5 cities over the course of the next whatever days. And then the other piece was, oh no, what has happened to the work that I'm doing? Like, has it all just gone away, poof, overnight?
Yeah.
And simultaneous with that was the kids' school was also canceled. We had 5 kids, and nobody was going to school, and so all these things are happening, hitting at once. Happiness, desperation, all these funky feelings, and really zero clarity about how we're going to make our way through all of this. And
So
as a
could I jump in on that?
yeah,
I'd like to know, because both of you are Vistage superstars. Um, do you have um, um, you may not actually have the evidence in a research presentation like what I used to do when I worked political campaigns, but can you, is there some point now in your presentations where you can say, these are circumstances with leadership that I encountered pre-March of 2020 and what I'm looking at post-March 2020? Because I mean, we talk now obviously the sadness of my grandfather was, he was 92 and he was still taking walks, and then at his assisted living facility, then COVID hit. uh, he was predisposed to pneumonia. This killed him. So I understand the sadness aspect of it, and I'm not trying to diminish the in numerous deaths around the world, not just in the United States. But in terms of business, I still feel as if we don't know what the hell the post-COVID world will actually lead us to at the end of this decade, right? Like, you have questions of corporate real estate, companies that are just basically saying, well, yes, we need office space. Hell, we need tax write-offs, whatever, but we don't need that much office space. And this initial aversion of or opposition, I should say, to work from home culture, now being not embraced but much more accepted, because you're not going to have folks that are going to say, I'm going back to work 5 days a week, 40 hours, 50, 60 hours a week, and I'm sitting in that cubicle because, man, I love it. I mean, it's, you see differences in work-life balance, and I think that's coincided with Gen Z. Although Mark still thinks I'm just a young man. I am a millennial, but on the opposite end. I'm on the early 40s, so I'm like a senior millennial. The generation coming after me, it was coming of age when COVID was happening. I feel like they also are saying more work-life balance, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, what changes, what differences do you see with leaders, perhaps in a Vistage room, perhaps not, perhaps people they oversee, that basically is they're prevalent right now, and how are you adapting your Vistage presentations to that, or if at all, maybe there is no adaptation, maybe it's just, look, we work from home more. But I feel that leaders have had to adjust, because the going back to my original question here, the unimaginable. I mean, we'd had pandemics before. We had pandemics during Obama. We had H1N1. We they just weren't to this scale, right? But now that was unimaginable. Now perhaps where they're headed the rest of this decade is also unimaginable, where you're going to have a sizable amount of your executives that want to work from home, and you're going to have to outcompete. They're willing to take less money to work from home and have work-life balance. I mean, what have you encountered?
well, all kinds of things. It's been a hodgepodge, actually. Folks who never want to get together again for an in-person Vistage session. Folks who, because of the pandemic, will never ever do anything virtual again. Folks who swear that, like, we took the time off to work from home and that we're never going to do that again. Other folks that say this is the only way to do it and we're so much more efficient. It runs the gamut.
Well said.
But what I would come back to is when this whole thing hits us locally at Team TESCHNER, and it was sparked, Mark, by your comment. I called for a random family movie night, and our kids were really young. 5 kids right now, spanning an age from 18 down to just turned 7. So every 3 years about is when another one has popped out. So do the math. Minus, I suppose, given where this thing hit, maybe Nicholas wasn't around. Anyway, bottom line, called for a random family movie night on Tuesday night, and we watched Midway. And we watched the 2018 version of Midway, and the reason, and it, you know, my wife was like, "Oh, come on, a war movie in the midst of all of this?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely, in the midst of all of this." About Navy pilots coming off of aircraft carriers doing, I'm like, "Yes, Navy pilot." And the reason we did it is that it was, we were seeking some inspiration. Like, it was hopeless in the Pacific after Pearl Harbor was hit. Like, there was no hope, and it was like there's no way that we're ever going to be able to rebound from this. And yet, a small group of people found a way to do so, and Midway was the decisive turning point of this whole thing, based upon a few good guesses and some hunches and trust and whatever else. Turned the tide, and it was an exceptional performance, and it led the way to VJ Day that caused your dad to not get a chance to fly a dive bomber, Mark. And at the end of that family movie night, the takeaway for all of us was, don't know what the world's going to look like, don't know how this is going to end up happening, but we're also going to find a way. And I think we as leaders, regardless of all of the disruptions that we're still dealing with on the heels of that particular event, COVID-19 coming out and schwacking us, it's our capacity to be able to be prepared to be resilient and deal with whatever this changing work environment looks like, and project confidence, fact-based confidence and optimism in a brighter tomorrow. That's what we're called to do. And I don't know what it looks like for everybody. I don't know exactly what the answers are either for each of these cases, but in our company's circumstance, we're always mining Gallup for the latest data that they're bringing out about the state of employee engagement, the challenges that folks are feeling, how it is that people are happy in life or not, and how that's affecting things, the way the different generations are looking. And then we're trying to figure out, how do we rise to the occasion and bring this group of people that we're privileged to lead today forward into a brighter tomorrow. That is our obligation.
Well said. I'm not so sure I can add any more to that. Maybe the difference I'm seeing is, I used to see a decidedly male arrogance 15 years ago.
Mm.
That used to be like where there'd be at least one person. So partly what I teach is how to create extreme valuation. So how to take the company from, let's say, 25 million to 125 million, and maximize their opportunity. So, and I used to get, once a month, I would get a man go, "It's not like that." That has gone the way of the dodo. What has replaced that type of arrogance is another type of arrogance, where there is a large section of people who are allergic to reality. And when I teach them the science of human nature, they get really pissed. Like, Cujo, I've decided not to speak in San Francisco anymore,
Mm.
because 80% of the population, great. 20%, assassinate my character, rate me a 1, tell me like I'm the worst human being on the planet because I told them reality. That, that I've found to be quite a struggle. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. I think maybe it's because everybody went online. And what we don't recognize is we suffer from two things. One is blue lies. This came from a study of the police departments in New York City in the 70s. That turns out, like, let's say you tell me I look good in this shirt when I don't, because you're my buddy, right? A white lie is a lie we tell to benefit the listener. So it proves loyalty and friendship. Blue lies are lies we tell to a coalition to prove loyalty to that coalition.
Mm.
So, and we don't know it consciously, but the really pernicious part of it is that the wackier the belief, the wackier the lie that's believed, more loyalty is produced in that belief.
Interesting.
So, like, I get in trouble for saying what I'm about to say, but I see no difference between AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I see them as two halves of the same stupid coin, that they're actually prosecuting what turns out to be a false religious agenda politically and don't know it. So
Huh.
people are, as society is becoming more and more secular or less religious, the natural religion in us, in evolutionary terms, it's called religiosity. So we displace that natural religiosity when we're not religious, and it goes into the political sphere, and we create a new religion of national politics where any compromise becomes a sin. So really what we have here is online, stupidity scales online. So it's like a special type of moral arrogance that, believe it or not, is not solved for by either IQ nor advanced academic degrees. Like, the higher the IQ, the more the advanced academic degrees. You don't become better at seeking the truth. You become better at articulating your stupid ideas. And it takes
Interesting.
truly brilliant people to believe really dumb ideas. And that is everywhere. So, so what? That's the arrogance that I'm seeing today. It's displaced religiosity is what I'm calling it, and I find it really quite frustrating. So, and partly the thing is, I can't speak in Seattle or Portland because it's too ridiculously difficult to get home from there. I have to take red eyes, and you brought up the 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 whole
Two
concept of
hybrids.
travel in our world, because I think like you, the most amount of airplanes I've ever been on is 28 airplanes in 1 month, and I've been on 8 in 1 week. And when I tell that to the flight attendants, that's more than they do, right? So,
Right.
and you got to understand what I'm talking about, right? Especially with
100%.
yes, so like that, it's flying all the way across the country to find myself in a firing squad. Not a big fan. So what I do is the worst two places are Boston and San Francisco for me. So what I do is when they contact me in San Francisco, I'm just telling them no, it's not worth the heartache or the headache. But in Boston, I tell them you have to convince me I'm not walking into a firing squad, and I sit in silence on the phone until the chair tells me that they've weeded out that type of arrogance out of their group. And if they don't, I don't go. I said, no, you want to cancel this presentation. Your members are going to hate this. And sometimes they do. So,
That's an awfully wise approach.
well, here's the thing. Well,
Seasoned by years of going navigating the system.
yeah. So picture I'm in San Francisco last time I was there. So I turned to the best practice chair. That's like a chair of chairs, Michael. So like they teach us like how to be better chairs. So and they're real leaders of leaders, stellar human beings, by the way, just
Mm-hmm.
unbelievably good people. So I turned to them and I said, look, in the morning session, they weren't listening. They kept saying, when you made statements like, meanwhile, when I was discussing facts, they said to me, I was listening from yes and yes and yes and I was like, that's not listening. You're listening in order to speak. So there's a weird thing that goes on. I think it comes from the dominant personalities that we deal with. Cujo is the some listen from judge instead of listening from student. And I do my best to get them out of there. I get a buy-in, all that type of stuff. But some people are just so committed to their political ideology, they can't hear you. And because they're hearing through a lens that, I have another shirt that says politics makes us stupid. There's a world famous psychologist out of the University of Pennsylvania that what he argues is his research suggests, that's kind of PhD speak for this is a fact. But he said, my research suggests that you're either in investigation mode or prosecution mode. You cannot be in both simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how do we spend a little more time in investigation mode? But I got to tell you, Cujo, I like your style. And it's not just because I have a soft place for people that fly jets, by the way. By the way, Mike's a Miami Dolphins fan. So you can't miss a dig there. So the idea is that you've got this attitude where you're curious. That's what I hear when you speak, and I've got this reverence for people who have put themselves in harm's way to protect my right to sleep in my own bed, that type of thing. So I like your attitude. Keep it up. So and frankly, if you need to talk, if you're ever downstairs mentally or you're going through something tough, I'm your next phone call. You're doing noble,
Thank you.
necessary work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind.
No sweat. So I'll send you
One
my
one quick
cell number.
question. One quick question, Cujo. So, do you also, as part of your work, look at his and being former military? Do you look at former leaders and whether it's an autobiography or biography, take what their leadership lessons were in what they faced and kind of work that into how you present, whether it be examples of what they were doing? I know you mentioned World War II and the battles on Midway. um I'm more of a Civil War guy. Like I visit Civil War battlefields. That's just my thing. But do you use that? Do you perhaps read books, or just you had lessons when you were going through training on how it is that the leadership decisions they had to make, and how you could apply those in the C-suite today?
We're prepared to, but I've actually gone away from that, and it's funny listening to Mark talk about where it is that he says no to, and some of the features of speaking in this world. I've used it to change the things that we bring up and how it is that we talk about the principles that we teach. This thing Vistage has changed the way we do it. It used to be a little bit more of the, hey, here's a military example and here's how it applies. But after hearing from the same group, I don't understand why it is that we have to listen from another military person's perspective how to successfully lead in business. And I'm sick and tired of this. To I wish that Cujo had told us more military stories. I just take it all out, actually,
Yeah,
and we
that's
just focus on the raw principles, actually.
yeah. So like the raw principles of leadership, yeah, they may have to adapt because of technology. They may have to adapt because we're certainly divided as a country, but
Hmm.
we're not at the point that there's a Fort Sumter. But
Good point.
God, I hope not. But you would say then that leadership has certain character traits that you would have to have regardless of 19th 18th 20th or 21st century. It's just a constant adaptation due to conditions.
That's right. Without getting into the specifics of who it is that might have taught me this particular lesson, whereas I might have previously referenced General Patton, these days I don't. I will also say that in my studies, and I walked to Gettysburg myself, in
I
my
was there
studies,
last summer.
Civil War is the hardest thing for me to comprehend. And it's one of the toughest things to study because I cannot fathom a family attacking itself. And I mean,
Yeah.
the big family of our nation, attacking itself, but then actual literal family members
Took
attacking one
opposite
another.
sides, brothers that
Yeah,
were raised
it
together.
is so horrific to conceive of that, and I mean, war itself is already so horrific that you can't. I mean, like, what a blessing, Mark, that your father did not get a chance to go experience it, because it changes you. I mean, there's nothing there's nothing good about the process of killing another human being, and doing so in a war, it doesn't make it any easier. To do it against your own country is so horrific to fathom, and to have lived through that. I mean, you can't choose when you live, you can't choose what war you live through. And for those who lived at that time, I cannot fathom. And so I pray that we're never in that. And it's funny, something else that you said earlier, Mark, about the work that you do and how you do it. I think with the attempt at dividing us as a nation, one of the places that we can depend on to help guide us through and to rebuild the fabric of who we are is actually business, because a business has to have functioning team members doing functioning things, seeking to achieve a common objective. And so maybe by learning how to rehumanize ourselves and team together effectively in business is our theory at VMAX Group, we can also repair the ills that have been sort of inflicted upon us and heightened over the recent years, so that we can be that one nation under God again, and reach our full potential. That's really our hope, is to repair.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Well, to me, it's like in the business space, it's a high accountability world.
Hmm.
Bad ideas fester in low accountability environments like universities. So I warn people that when the HR department's running everything, nothing's going to be run right, including HR. So how do you win them over to help you weed out people who are like misguided activists or going to sue you or something like that? Because the mission's more important. And
That's right.
I believe the mission is this. It's that through commerce, we're capable of what religion hopes to accomplish and what politicians fail at, which is taking care of large scale communities. So all we got to do is have the right context and then just execute the right way. And then all we really have to do is handle those black swan events just a little better than our competition. That's
Mm.
it.
That's
So as
right.
I
long
would say that Pembroke Pines, Florida, is very well represented, though. Go ahead.
oh, well, I got one more story for you, Cujo. And I know we've gone kind of long with this, but it's been an interesting conversation. So picture one of my clients just turned 100, by the way, and he was a navigator on a B-25, a Mitchell, right? He bombed for Patton in the Battle of the Bulge. And then he bombed this one German city. It was like, I think they bombed this city for a month straight, leveled the entire city. I don't believe it was Dresden. It's a name that I can't pronounce. But he was so he leaves. Now he was a navigator because he couldn't land the plane dead solid straight. He had to turn it slightly so he had a better view. and he do anything differently, you're the navigator now. So picture he's a
guy.
biochemist. He leaves the military after World War II, becomes a brewmaster with Lowenbrow, when Lowenbrow used to be brewed here in Connecticut, and they rotated him to Germany to take lessons in the town he leveled. And they turned to him and they say, "Oh, were you in the war?" This is like in 55 or so. He said, "Were you in the war?" He goes, "Yeah." They said, "What'd you do?" He said, "I was a medic." I promised you into oblivion. I figured you'd get a kick out of that one.
Oh my gosh.
I got one
funny.
more for you if you got a moment for me.
Of
One more.
course.
All right, so picture you guys, is everyone on this call know who Jocko Willink is?
Absolutely. In fact, I got his copy of Extreme Ownership sitting around here
There
somewhere.
you go. So picture this. We're in Tarrytown, New York, and it wasn't Jocko, but it was Leif Babin, the co-author. Now, he looked like he was probably 6'3". He looked like an NFL linebacker. He had a neck like this, right? And he came in and taught Extreme Ownership to us before the book came out, right? And so it was all the chairs from New York City, about 60 of us, one of which was the former commandant. His last name's Miller. I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Miller. Big, tall guy. He was a colonel with the Marines, I believe. He was the commandant of the Allied forces in Germany until he retired. Then he became a chair. Great guy, by the way. And he's probably in his mid-70s, that type of thing. And after everything that Leif Babin would say, he'd do one of these things. Right? He did like, typical military. He was only removed from active duty by like maybe a couple of months when he did this for us. So picture Miller stands up at the end of the guy's presentation. He goes, "Hey, anyone want to see me get my ass kicked? I'm going to tango with this guy out in the hallway afterwards." And all you saw was Leif Babin's shoulders just roll like this. And it turns out their commander is a chair in Louisville. Big, tall guy too. He's like 6'3", great guy too. He's like a giant farm boy. So picture, I can't recall his name off the top of my head, but he said, when I told him that story, he didn't even flinch, he didn't even laugh. He goes, "Get some."
Yeah.
I think you get a kick out of that.
Oh, that's incredible. And in fact, I feel like I'm going out that well. Is it Ed Gallerine by any chance?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. So I'll be
I'll
getting a chance to meet him. I didn't realize that he was their commander. Okay. I knew that he was an ex-Navy SEAL.
Yeah. So get this. He goes, I do a thing where, I talked 2 CEOs out of suicide in the financial crisis. And like my chair training did not teach me how to do that. That really sucked. That was a long and arduous is the nice way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like a walking woodshed meeting. So I walk in the room and just start slapping CEOs around the room and say, "Listen, you're pointing the energies of your company in the right direction. We're cool. If we're not, I'm taking you out to the woodshed and slapping you around because we're not cool. Like you got to point the energies of your company in the right direction as long as you're doing that." And like I must have said, "Slap you around," and then I kept looking at Ed, going, "Except for this guy." He was going to hurt people a lot better than I do. And he's about 4 times my size. So I really want to thank you for your time. This is really excellent. So let's do this again.
Let me offer one final thought, if I may, just because there were some discussions about politics and whatnot. One of the things that always saddens me is when you open up a full-page spread in the New York Times or Washington Post with a bunch of ex-generals, 4-stars, admirals, whatever, talking about being for or against a particular commander-in-chief. And when you hear folks talking about their political opinions, with a military uniform on or whatever, is one of the things that's very important to me personally. Is the way that I was raised as the son of an Air Force JAG officer, by the way. And one of the things that our team firmly believes in is that we have to remain agnostic as members of the military, both on duty and afterwards, and like always support the orders of the commander in chief, regardless of what political party they come from and whatnot. I just want to be very absolutely clear here that is someday, Mike, if I ever run for office, wherever, Broward County, you'll know exactly what I think about things. But here, for the purposes of everybody that's listening, we are 100% on board with whoever it is that's in that office. That's the civilian oversight and authority of the entire enterprise, both on duty and beyond. And that's very, very important to hear. And it's part of us staying one nation.
Well, I don't think we could say that any better. So I want to thank you for your time, Cujo, and let's do this
Thank
again.
you.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
This is awesome.
Thank you.
Take care.